National Guardsman Sarah Beckstrom gunned down in the US Capitol in broad daylight on Wednesday afternoon. As news of her death was confirmed last night and a procession drove her body for a post-mortem, the fears of many Americans were brought to the fore. Passers-by filmed the moments after Wednesday's attack. President Trump had argued that calling troops onto the streets of Democrat-run cities was to reduce crime, but others saw it as a political provocation that could end badly. Mr. Trump described Ms. Beckstrom as a national hero.
Outstanding in every way. She's just passed away. She's no longer with us. She's looking down at us right now.
31-year-old Afghan Ramanullah Lakanwal was quickly named as the suspect. He's now been charged with first-degree murder. The D.C. attorney and Trump ally Jeanine Pirro promised to delve deep into his background.
About what actually happened in terms of this individual even being in this country and being in a position to ambush and shoot down an innocent young woman.
Lakanwal had fled Afghanistan in the chaotic US withdrawal of 2021 during the Biden administration. He'd reportedly fought against the Taliban for an Afghan paramilitary force and been trained by the CIA. He was eventually granted asylum by the Trump administration only a few months ago, after he'd started his second term. The president tried to pin the blame on his predecessor in another unedifying outburst at a female reporter.
Why do you blame the Biden administration?
Because they let him in. Are you stupid? Are you a stupid person? Because they came on a plane along with thousands of other people that shouldn't be here, and you're just asking questions because you're a stupid person.
On social media, Trump promised to denaturalize migrants who undermine domestic tranquility and deport any foreign national who's a public charge, security risk, or non-compatible with Western civilization. Migrant communities are fearful that ICE raids may now escalate, with several federal agencies announcing sweeping immigration reviews. The US Citizenship and Immigration Service has indicated the crackdown would apply to countries previously named in Trump travel bans that were introduced this June. They include states the US has very complex relations with, like Afghanistan, Iran, Cuba, and Venezuela, and several that Mr. Trump has fewer obvious reasons to target, like Sierra Leone, Togo, and Turkmenistan, making a list of 19 countries considered, quote, of concern. Afghan rights groups say, don't blame us for the alleged crimes of just one man.
We see school shootings in the United States very, very frequently. Often it's political violence or violence committed by white men. And we don't say, oh, this is a racial problem. We don't say, we should think, and, we should start thinking of banning white Americans or white males from schools.
Tonight, the other victim, Andrew Wolf, is still in a critical condition. The attack on him and Sarah Beckstrom highlighting America's profound social and political divisions.
Well, joining me now is the lawyer and former head of Human Rights Watch, Kenneth Roth. If you're a US citizen or green card holder from any of these 19 countries, or probably a few more, you're probably living in fear of being grabbed by one of these hooded federal agents. What legal protection do you have?
I mean, quite a few. Once you are a U.S. citizen, even if by way of naturalization, you cannot have that taken away unless there was fraud found in your application. That's very difficult to prove. I mean, if you look at this particular case, I mean, Trump goes on and on about why did his administration grant asylum to this Afghan man. They knew all about him. He was completely vetted. This was the guy who was a member of a so-called zero unit working with the CIA. There was essentially a death squad in Afghanistan. The Trump administration knew all that and admitted him anyway. Now, he's said to have had mental health problems. One can understand that as a response to being in a death squad. But, to go from this single individual to Trump, trying to turn this into a broad condemnation of immigration, blaming immigrants for crime when in fact immigrants are 60% less likely to be imprisoned than native-born Americans. I mean, this is all classic Trump just to pursue his racist anti-immigrant agenda.
Right, but how much of a turning point do you think this is if you put it together with the travel ban on these 19 countries and the way that the administration says it's going to change, well, it's going to start looking at people from those countries and their immigration status?
Well, this travel ban, as was just noted, was instituted in June. And in a sense, Trump is just saying, I'm going to intensify this travel ban, mostly on countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia. And it's a bit of a mishmash of countries. There's not a lot of rhyme and reason to it. If you look at Trump's social media posting where he announced this, it was classic rambling. He went on and on about Somalis in Minnesota, and then toward the end got around to this particular Afghan man. But I think we should recognize what's happening here. I mean, Trump's polling is plummeting in large part because he's not addressing the cost of living problems that many Americans are feeling. And he is, falling back on his safe zone and attacking immigrants for a crime wave that nobody but him actually sees.
He's also effectively ending the ability of people to seek asylum from these countries, isn't he? I mean, how does that square with the United States' obligations under the Refugee Convention?
Well, there are two ways to look at that. I mean, one are people who are already in the United States. They have a right to seek asylum. That's a judicial decision. Trump can't just say, no, you're not going to get asylum. If they actually have a credible fear of persecution if sent back, they're entitled to stay. Now, where Trump has much more leeway is around refugees outside the United States who have petitioned to come to the United States. And Trump has radically reduced the number of refugee admissions from 125,000 that typically come in to just roughly 7,000. I mean, a radical reduction. And he wants to reserve a lot of those for white South Africans fleeing what he claims is a huge problem of racist violence in South Africa that, again, most people don't see.
And obviously the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has an immigrant family background himself. But Cubans are also on this list, aren't they?
I mean, the Cubans, the Venezuelans, and that's the irony here. And Marco Rubio has in a sense given up his past. One appropriate response to this would be to say, okay, here was a guy who was committing summary executions on the U.S. government's behalf. Maybe we should stop supporting summary executions. But that's not what Trump is going to say right now, because Trump is sponsoring summary executions off the Venezuelan coast in the Caribbean against so-called drug suspects. These are completely lawless murders, but he's not examining this clear criminality. He's addressing concocted criminality on the part of immigrants who are much less likely than Native Americans to commit crimes.
But how far do you think the Trump influence is spreading? I mean, there have been reports in the press in recent days that the Trump administration has been writing to European governments saying you should also be stopping mass migration. You should also be making the case against, preserving your sovereignty. Is this a philosophy that is spreading from Washington and the Trump administration over here?
The Trump administration is deliberately promoting this white Christian ideology, the idea that Western civilization is premised on white Christianity, and any immigration contrary to that somehow undercuts the pillars of Western civilization. It's a blatantly racist, often Islamophobic approach. That's what Trump represents in the United States. And he's trying to promote similar far-right political parties in Europe to try to enhance this view.
Kenneth Roth, thank you very much.
Thank you.